I want to start by telling you something that you're already thinking. You're looking at me and you're wondering how I ended up in this wheelchair. It's okay to wonder. I'd wonder too. In fact, I could sit here for the next 15 minutes and talk to you about sport, politics, pretty much anything, and at the end of it, a lot of you would still walk out of here thinking, yeah, but how did he end up in that wheelchair? So we'll get it out of the way. But before I do, I want to share a number with you. According to the World Health Organization, approximately 16% of the world's population lives with some form of significant disability. That's 1.3 billion people. Of those, only 6% are wheelchair users. And of that 6%, about a third still have some movement. So statistically, what I've been through, living with paralysis and being in a wheelchair, is one of the least relatable things in this room. Do you know what's more relatable? Growing up in a difficult home. Almost half the world did. Living paycheck to paycheck. Also about half. Struggling with your mental health, with grief, with a body that's letting you down in ways that no one can see. The difference between your struggles and mine isn't that mine is harder. It's that mine is visible. Yours you can hide, mine I can't. So I'm going to tell you my story. But it's not really about being in a wheelchair, it's about something that applies whether you can walk or not. Growing up, I felt invincible. As a kid, I would run everywhere. And when I got the bus home from school, I'd run to the first stop. And if it wasn't there, I'd run to the next one, and often end up running all the way home. By the time I was 20, I was 6'4", 107 kilos of muscle, playing loose head prop for my rugby club. I'd left home young, started my own business, had my own flat. Life was good. I was strong, independent. I was, as far as I was concerned, indestructible. Then 2 days before my 21st birthday, I was walking home from work and I coughed, collapsing to the ground with pain shooting down my legs. A cough, that's it. I had a slipped disc, and during the first surgery to try and fix it, my spinal cord was ruptured. During a second surgery to try and fuse my spine, which means implanting titanium rods, screws, and a cage for structural support, also failed. The result of which means I spend every moment of my life in constant pain. I spent the following 18 months in and out of hospital. I fell through the NHS system and had no proper rehabilitation or physiotherapy. I went into that hospital as 6'4" and 107 kilos. After my second surgery, I weighed just 45. And when people hear about my story, they assume the worst part was losing the use of my legs. It wasn't. The worst part was losing my independence. I'd spent my whole life being the person that didn't need anyone, leaving home early, setting up my business. I was the one who would help other people. But then suddenly I was in a position when I couldn't wash myself. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't go to the toilet on my own. And because I'd been that person my whole life, the strong one who always had a joke ready, I carried that with me into hospital. I cracked jokes during procedures. I smiled with the nurses. I tried to be as well as possible. But one day, when I was lying on a hospital bed, waiting for yet another procedure when all of the previous ones had failed, and something in me snapped. I broke down crying and through my tears told my doctor, properly for the first time, that I'd lost my flat, my business, my relationship. I had lost everything. And the doctor said to me, and I'll never forget this, "We didn't realize you were so bad." I was losing consciousness trying to stand up, but they didn't realize how bad I was because I had masked everything with laughing and with frankness. My stoicism, the thing that I was most proud of, had arguably cost me treatment. And I learned something that day that I want you to hear, because a lot of people in this room need to hear it. Being tough is not the same as being silent. You can control how you face something. You cannot always fix it alone. And when I was in hospital, I was surrounded by people that were fighting their own battles. And to me, I became appreciative of all of the things that I still retained. I still had my mind. I still had some of my upper body. And I still had friendships. And I became friendly with another patient on my ward, Roydell. Roydell had come in for shoulder surgery, and he couldn't use his hands. I couldn't use my legs. So I guess between the two of us, we made one able-bodied human being. And in a strange way, something about that friendship began to reset things in my mind. That hospital I was in was built on a hill, really steep hill like this that looked impossible to push up in a wheelchair without help. So that became my project. Whenever I could, I would try and push up that hill, and then I'll sprint back down it. I would fly past other patients and doctors telling them to go faster, and as I got strong enough, I'll start trying to push other patients up the hill too, because as any good athlete knows, you only improve with progressive overload. I was still in horrendous pain. I was still 40-something kilos. But I was still in a body that I didn't recognize. But for the first time since surgery, I was doing something. More importantly, I was choosing something. And I was doing this because I had finally figured out what this whole talk was about. If there is one question that determines the quality of your life, it is this: what can I actually control? You cannot control a cough that drops you to the ground. You cannot control the surgeon's hand that ruptures your spinal cord. You cannot control the home you're born into, the economy you face, or the person who didn't love you back. What you can control is what you do next, and more specifically, how much effort you put into what you do next. Effort is the single biggest predictor of success in anything. Not talent, not luck, not where you started. Effort. The more you do something, the better you get. That's it. Of course, equity plays a significant part as well. But the beautiful thing about effort is that no one can give it to you. Nobody can take it from you. A cough can't take it from you. A surgeon can't take it from you. And everything that I've done since hospital, every single thing, has been built on that one idea. A few years after I left hospital, I became involved with a charity for people with spinal cord injuries, and another wheelchair user and I decided to do the London Marathon to raise money. In a standard wheelchair like this, it takes between 4 to 6 hours of absolute agony. Then 6 weeks before the race, my very reliable friend pulls out. But I'd heard about these things called racing wheelchairs, extremely aerodynamic wheelchairs that allow the fastest athletes to complete the marathon in under an hour and a half. And I thought to myself, that seems much more sensible than 6 hours. However, access is one of the biggest barriers into disability sport. If you can walk and want to do a marathon, you buy a pair of trainers, you turn up. If you can't walk, every piece of equipment is bespoke. A racing chair takes months to build and can cost as much as a car. The old one that I have now still costs £8,500 without the wheels, because somehow wheels are an optional extra when you buy wheelchairs. You also can't just enter in a racing chair. You have to qualify as an elite athlete. They limit the participants for safety. But I had 6 weeks, and I still had no chair. Everything about this seemed impossible. But I managed to source a child's racing chair with battered old wheels, and I could just about squeeze into it. Remember, I was skeletal leaving hospital, and my legs still had the scars from squeezing into that frame. And in a racing chair, the wheels move too quickly for you to grip onto them, so you have to punch the wheels instead, hitting it at just the right angle to drive and propel it forward. Normally, it can take years to learn and develop properly. But I had 6 weeks. This seemed like an impossible challenge, yet I was the happiest I had been in years. And when race day came, the atmosphere was extraordinary. And by the halfway stage, I was going faster than I'd ever gone before, and on course for one of the fastest debut marathon times ever recorded. So, with confidence, I decided to push harder. And remember that battered old chair I was using? Well, I punched straight through my wheel. The spokes exploded. I went from 20 miles an hour down to 1 mile an hour. The organizers tried to pull me off the course. I refused, not very politely, and then struggled on until roadside engineers managed to rebuild my wheel just enough for me to crawl over the finish line in around 3 hours. Everyone around me was cheering and overjoyed at my achievement, but all I felt was disappointment and anger. I felt that I'd let people down, which was ridiculous, because I hadn't done anything wrong. My equipment had failed, not me. But I was so angry that the very next day I went to the athletics track, didn't speak to anyone, and I did the marathon alone on that 400-meter loop. It's 105 very boring laps for anyone that's interested. And it took me a long time to understand why I was so angry that day. I had put in the work. I had actually achieved all of my targets, and I had done the impossible by getting to that start line. But now, Whether I'm on the start line of a marathon or about to fight in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, I'm not nervous. I'm completely calm. Because I know before that gun goes off whether I've done the work. The result is already decided. The race or fight is just the reveal. That peace, that calm at the start line, is the reward for the effort. And it is available to any of you. You just have to be honest with yourself about whether you've earned it. Effort is the engine, but effort alone is not enough. You need 3 things to make it sustainable. The first is curiosity. When I left hospital, the medical system told me that I was fragile, vulnerable. Then a friend took me to try wheelchair basketball. I saw paralyzed people thrown to the floor, prosthetic legs flying across the court, people smashing into each other at full speed and laughing about it. And I realized that the story I'd been told about my own body was wrong. I wasn't fragile, I just had to be curious enough to find out. Curiosity is the thing that keeps you asking, what else is possible? When everyone around you is telling you that you've reached the edge. A few years ago, it's what made me decide to cycle 3,500 miles across America on my handbike, carrying my wheelchair on the back. With just one friend on a bike documenting the journey, we had no support vehicle. Because not only would that have been too easy, but it would have defeated the purpose of what I was trying to achieve, proving that someone in a wheelchair could independently go bikepacking. 48 days. Miami to Los Angeles, it was physically relentless and mentally exhausting. But that journey that everyone said was impossible ended up being a world first for crossing America and raised over £200,000 that's now helping fund other people to fulfill their dreams. The second thing is humour. Spend enough time in hospital or around any group of disabled people and you'll really begin to understand why the expression gallows humour exists. Some of the darkest, most inappropriate jokes I've ever heard have often come from disabled people discussing their own disabilities. The only people who ever get offended are normally the able-bodied people who overhear us. Humour is the most important thing in my life, because no matter what is taken from you, humour can never be taken. It is entirely yours. I was once giving a talk in a school, and after explaining what paralysis meant, a little boy stuck up his hand and questioned, "So that means you can't walk?" And I said, "No, I can't." And after hesitating for a moment, he looked at me suspiciously and said, "But when was the last time you tried?" The teachers were mortified. I was in hysterics. It's the funniest question anyone has ever asked me. And I went home that evening, not particularly proud of this, but I did give it a go. It didn't work. The third thing is never be afraid to ask. When I was cycling across America, as we approached Los Angeles, I received a message from the head of the LAPD cycling team asking if there was anything they could do to help me when I came into the city. Being the cheeky guy that I am, obviously I asked for a full police escort. They gave me helicopters, squad cars, half of LA was shut down just so that I could cycle through the red lights, all because I had asked. Fun side note about that, last 2 people to have that much security going through an American city were me and President Obama. Confucius said, "Everyone has 2 lives, and the second begins when we realize that we only have one." My second life, it started on that hospital bed, when I admitted to the doctor that I wasn't okay. And everything that I've done since, the marathons, the world championships, the ride across America, sitting in front of you now doing the one thing that I genuinely dislike, which is public speaking, all of it comes from the same handful of ideas. You cannot control what happens to you. You can control the effort you put into what happens next. You need curiosity, because the edge of the map is almost never where people tell you it is. You need humour, because it is the one thing that can never be taken from you. And you need to ask, because most of the doors that you think are locked aren't. I started by telling you that my struggle is visible and yours is invisible. That doesn't make yours any less real. Whatever cough knocks you to the ground, the rules are the same for all of us. Control what you can, put in the effort, stay curious, find the joke, and ask for help. And when you get to the start line of whatever race is next for you, you'll already know the result. Thank you.